Every parent dreams of their child's wedding day, a moment filled with joy, love, and the promise of new beginnings. For Samuel Reyes, a widowed father who had raised his daughter Vivian with nothing but hard work and unconditional love, that day was meant to be the proudest of his life. He had sacrificed so much long nights at the auto shop, missed opportunities, even his own comfort to give her a better future. But beneath the glittering lights of the reception hall and the laughter of well-dressed guests, Samuel felt a quiet unease. Vivian's fiancé, Jasper Hale, came from wealth, refinement, and privilege, a world far removed from their modest Brooklyn neighborhood. From the very beginning, Samuel had sensed Jasper's arrogance, the subtle insults, the dismissive gestures, the way he treated people he thought beneath him. And then, on the wedding day itself, when Jasper pulled out Samuel's chair in front of everyone, sending him crashing to the floor, the humiliation cut deeper than any wound. What no one expected was that this cruel act would unravel secrets long buried and change everything. The winter air seeped through the cracks in the old garage, carrying with it the sound of car horns from the busy Brooklyn street. Samuel Reyes hunched over the half-assembled Harley that had been his project for months, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag so stained it would never be clean again. His back ached from long hours at the shop, but he smiled to himself as he adjusted the wrench. It wasn't just about fixing engines anymore. The quiet work kept his mind steady, his hands busy, and his memories from drowning him. A sudden bang on the side door startled him. Before he could even call out, his daughter, Vivian, burst inside. "Dad!" she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with the excitement of someone who had just been told a secret too big to hold. Samuel turned, a question already in his eyes. At 23, Vivian still had the same spark she did as a child, her mother's eyes, her mother's smile. That resemblance often tore at his heart. She held out her phone, bouncing on her toes. "Look! Jasper proposed!" On the screen, a video played a grand restaurant, chandeliers glittering overhead, waiters in white gloves serving wine that probably cost more than a week's groceries. Jasper, tall and impeccably dressed, knelt before her with a flawless diamond ring. His smile was wide, practiced, the kind of smile that had always unsettled Samuel. Samuel forced a smile of his own. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When's the big day?" "April," she said, laughing nervously. "I know it's soon, but Jasper says when you know, you know. He doesn't believe in wasting time." Samuel's eyes narrowed. April was only a few months away. Too soon, he thought. But he kept his doubts behind a father's mask of support. "That's not much time to plan a wedding," he said lightly, returning the phone. "What about his parents? Don't we need to meet them first?" "They're traveling through Europe. Art tours, museums, all that," she explained. "They'll be back just before the wedding. But it's fine, Jasper says he'll handle everything." Samuel nodded, but unease tightened in his chest. The weeks that followed became a blur of preparations. Invitations were ordered, menus discussed, dresses tried on. Vivian glowed with happiness, often humming in the kitchen as she folded bridal magazines, showing Samuel pictures of venues and floral arrangements. But for Samuel, the glow dimmed each time Jasper appeared. At their first dinner together, Jasper had chosen an expensive restaurant uptown. Samuel arrived in his best suit, the same one he had worn to his wife Maria's funeral years ago. Sitting across from Jasper, Samuel felt the subtle weight of comparison. Jasper's suit was perfectly tailored, his watch gleaming under the restaurant lights, His every movement spoke of money and privilege. "Vivian tells me you're a mechanic," Jasper said, glancing at the oil stains Samuel hadn't managed to scrub from his fingers. "Yes," Samuel replied, steady. "I've been fixing engines since before you were born. Built a good life with it." Jasper smiled, but it was all teeth. "Impressive. Though these days working smart is better than working hard, don't you think?" Samuel met his gaze. "Hard work builds more than just a career. It builds character." Vivian's eyes darted between them, sensing the tension but forcing a laugh. "You two just need time to get to know each other." But Samuel already knew enough. Jasper's arrogance wasn't a quirk, it was the foundation of who he was. At night, Samuel sometimes sat in the living room, staring at the photo of his late wife. Maria had passed when Vivian was 16, leaving Samuel to raise her alone. He'd promised her, standing at her bedside in those final moments, that he would protect Vivian no matter what. "Maria," he whispered to the photograph, "I don't know if this boy deserves her. He looks at her like she's a prize, not a partner. But how do I stop her from making the same mistakes we see in others?" The photo, of course, gave no answer. Only his own reflection in the glass stared back at him, a man weathered by time and sacrifice. The wedding day came too quickly. The venue was a grand estate on the edge of the city, rented by Jasper's family money. Guests filled the hall, women in glittering dresses, men in sharp tuxedos. The decorations were extravagant chandeliers, draped in crystals, roses lining every table, champagne flowing like water. Samuel arrived quietly, unnoticed by most, wearing the same suit he had worn at that first dinner. He felt like an outsider in the sea of wealth, but his eyes softened the moment he saw Vivian in her gown. She looked radiant, every bit her mother's daughter. During the reception, Samuel moved among strangers, listening to conversations filled with names he didn't recognize and vacations he could never afford. He caught Jasper nearby, laughing too loudly. His arm wrapped around Vivian's waist in a way that seemed more possessive than tender. Samuel tried to sit at his assigned table, but Jasper approached with a smirk. "Let me get your chair for you," Jasper said loudly, drawing attention from nearby guests. Samuel, though cautious, nodded and began to lower himself down. At that precise moment, Jasper yanked the chair away. Samuel crashed to the ground with a thud that silenced the music and sent a ripple of gasps across the room. Laughter erupted from a corner of guests, some unsure, some nervous. Jasper's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your place is on the floor." Vivian froze in horror, her hand covering her mouth. Samuel lay on the floor, his palms stinging, his pride shattered, his heart breaking at the cruelty of it all. And then, from across the room, another voice spoke firm, astonished, carrying authority. "Sir, is that you?" The crowd turned. An older man in a tailored suit, Jasper's father, stood with wide eyes. His face paled as he looked at Samuel, recognition dawning. Samuel slowly stood, dusting off his jacket. He met the man's gaze, his own expression unreadable. The reception hall had gone silent. Something far deeper than humiliation was about to unfold. The silence in the reception hall stretched, heavy and suffocating. Samuel could feel every pair of eyes fixed on him. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses, some chuckling nervously, others frowning at the spectacle. Vivian rushed to his side. "Dad, are you all right?" Her voice trembled, her hands hovering helplessly as though she wasn't sure whether to help him stand or to shield him from the stairs. Samuel straightened, brushing dust from his jacket. He forced a small smile at his daughter. "I'm fine, sweetheart." His voice was steady, but inside, his pride burned with humiliation. Jasper chuckled lightly, as if it had all been harmless fun. Relax, everyone. Just a little joke. Don't take it so seriously. Samuel met his gaze, eyes hard. A joke at someone else's expense isn't humor, it's cruelty. For a moment, the two men locked eyes, the weight of unspoken challenge between them. Vivian looked between them, torn, her face pale. And then Jasper's father stepped closer. His voice, low but firm, carried an undercurrent of shock. Samuel Reyes? Is that really you? Samuel turned, recognizing the man now that he was closer. Saul hailed Jasper's father. His hair was streaked with silver, his bearing straight as a soldier's, even in a civilian suit. His eyes, however, held something Jasper had never shown: humility. "It's been a long time," Samuel said evenly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Vivian blinked, confused. "Wait, Dad. You know him?" Saul hesitated, his jaw tightening as though he were grappling with emotions too heavy to name. "Your father is the man who saved my life, years ago, in the service." A ripple moved through the guests. Jasper's smirk faltered, the color draining from his face. Samuel cleared his throat, uncomfortable under the spotlight. "That was a long time ago. I was just doing my job." But Saul shook his head, his voice rising with conviction. "No, Samuel, you didn't just do your job. You carried me out of fire when no one else could. I owe you my life. And tonight, I see my own son humiliating you in front of everyone. God forgive me." His voice broke, thick with shame. The crowd shifted uneasily, murmurs swelling. Vivian's eyes widened with shock, tears welling up as she looked at her father with new eyes. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" Samuel softened, his voice quiet. "Because you didn't need to know. I wasn't raising you to admire medals or titles. I just wanted you to know love, respect, and honesty." Vivian covered her mouth, emotion breaking through. Jasper, on the other hand, tried to recover, raising his voice. "All right, enough with the dramatics. Everyone's making this out to be more than it is. My father exaggerates." "Exaggerates?" Saul thundered, startling everyone into silence. "I would be dead if not for this man. And you dare to mock him? In front of his daughter? In front of your bride?" Jasper's jaw clenched, but he couldn't muster his usual arrogance. He turned toward Vivian. "Sweetheart, you know I was just playing around. Don't listen to all this military nonsense." Vivian flinched as though his words struck her. "Nonsense? My father risked his life." Her voice cracked. "And you humiliated him. On our wedding day." Jasper reached for her hand, but she pulled back instinctively. Guests exchanged glances, whispers growing louder. At the family table, Aunt Ruth, Samuel's sister-in-law, leaned over to her husband, her voice sharp but hushed. "I told you this wedding was too much. Look at all this money wasted. If Samuel had just let us handle things, none of this drama would have happened." Her husband snorted. "Handle things? You mean grab the inheritance Maria left behind? Don't think I don't know your plans." Samuel caught fragments of their argument and felt a familiar ache family turning greedy when they smelled opportunity. He had dealt with their whispers before about how he raised Vivian alone, about the house Maria had left behind. Now, at his daughter's wedding, they were circling like vultures. As the tension spread, Samuel's voice cut through the noise, calm, measured, but filled with authority. "Enough." The room stilled. He looked first at Jasper. You wanted to humiliate me tonight, and you did. But you also revealed something else. The kind of man you are. A man who disrespects the people he claims to love. A man who sees others as tools, not partners. Vivian trembled, tears spilling down her cheeks as she clutched her dress. Dad! Samuel turned to her gently. Vivian, I won't tell you who to love. But remember what I taught you: love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. Her lips trembled, her eyes full of conflict. Jasper reached for her again, his face tight with desperation. Vivian, don't listen to him. He's just trying to poison you against me. He's jealous. Saul stepped forward, his voice hard as steel. Enough, Jasper. You've shamed this family tonight. And if you can't see the worth of the man standing in front of you, then you don't deserve the woman standing beside you. Gasps rippled across the room. Jasper's own father had turned against him. Jasper's mask cracked, his voice sharp with fury. You're choosing him? Him? Over your own son? Saul's eyes glistened, but his tone did not waver. I am choosing honor, Jasper, something you clearly know nothing about. Vivian's knees buckled, and Samuel caught her before she fell. I can't do this, she whispered, her voice broken. Dad, what have I done? Samuel held her tightly. Nothing wrong, sweetheart. You just loved someone who wasn't worthy of you. That's not your failure. It's his. The hall erupted into whispers, some guests leaving discreetly, others staring with open curiosity. The wedding was unraveling before everyone's eyes. But Samuel felt something he hadn't in years: strength. For the first time that night, Jasper had no words. His smirk was gone, replaced with a simmering rage. He stormed toward the exit, muttering threats under his breath. Vivian buried her face into her father's shoulder, her sobs muffled by his jacket. I thought he loved me, Dad. I really thought. Samuel stroked her hair, his voice steady, his heart aching. Love, real love, never comes with humiliation. You'll see that one day. The music had stopped. The chandeliers glistened above, casting fractured light across a family torn apart. But beneath the humiliation, betrayal, and grief, something new had taken root, the first spark of truth. And Samuel knew this was only the beginning. The wedding reception never fully recovered after Jasper stormed out. The music started again, but the joy was gone, replaced with forced smiles and awkward chatter. Guests drifted toward the buffet line more out of habit than celebration, avoiding Samuel's eyes as though his dignity had been contagious and dangerous. Vivian sat quietly beside her father, staring down at her untouched plate of food. The lace of her wedding gown pooled around her like fragile snow, but her hands shook as she clutched her napkin. Princess, Samuel said softly, leaning close so only she could hear. We don't have to stay here. We can leave any time you want. Her lips trembled. Dad, everyone's watching. Let them watch. You don't owe anyone your pain. Before she could answer, Aunt Ruth approached, her perfume arriving a second before her sharp voice. Well, isn't this just a disaster? All this money, all this effort, and for what? A broken wedding? Vivian flinched, but Samuel's gaze hardened. Ruth, this isn't the time. Oh, but it is, she snapped, folding her jeweled shawl tighter around her shoulders. Maybe if you had let me help plan, this circus wouldn't have happened. Honestly, Samuel, you've never known how to handle responsibility. Vivian's eyes filled with tears, and Samuel rose from his chair, his voice calm but steady. My daughter's heart just shattered, and your concern is money? Shame on you, Ruth. Ruth's husband tugged at her sleeve, but she yanked her arm away. Don't you dare shame me. Do you know how much this family has suffered because you insisted on keeping that old house, that garage, instead of selling it? Maria left things behind that could have made us all comfortable. But no, you clung to your pride. Samuel's jaw tightened. Maria left those things for Vivian, not for scavengers. A murmur of agreement swept through nearby guests. Ruth flushed red but turned on her heel, muttering insults under her breath as she stormed away. Vivian buried her face in her hands. I can't take this, Dad. Everyone's turning against us. Samuel wrapped an arm around her shoulders. No, sweetheart. They're revealing who they truly are. That's different. That night, when the reception ended in fractured silence, Samuel and Vivian returned to their modest home. She collapsed on the couch, still in her gown, sobbing into the cushions. Samuel stood in the doorway, watching her, wishing Maria were still alive to give their daughter the comfort only a mother could. The front door rattled suddenly, then burst open. Jasper stood there, his tie undone, his face twisted with anger. Vivian, we need to talk, he demanded, stepping inside without invitation. Samuel stiffened. You don't barge into my house. Jasper sneered. Your house? This dump? Please, Vivian deserves better than this. Vivian sat up, her cheeks wet with tears. Jasper, please. Not tonight. But Jasper wasn't listening. He strode toward her, his voice rising. You embarrassed me. You let your father poison everything. Do you have any idea what people are saying about me now? Samuel stepped forward, his tone sharp. You embarrassed yourself. You chose cruelty. Jasper spun on him, rage in his eyes. Stay out of this. She's my wife now. Vivian's voice cracked like thunder. No! Don't you dare call me that! The room froze. Samuel looked at her, astonished by the strength in her voice. Vivian rose, her gown swishing around her ankles. I loved you, Jasper. I defended you. But tonight, you showed me who you really are. And I can't spend my life with a man who thinks humiliation is love. Jasper blinked, his mouth opening, but no words came. He reached for her arm, but Samuel stepped between them. You need to leave, Samuel said firmly. Jasper's face twisted, his voice low with venom. This isn't over. You'll regret this, both of you. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Vivian collapsed into Samuel's arms, sobbing again. Dad, I don't know how to face tomorrow. Samuel kissed her hair, whispering, You don't have to face it alone. Days turned into weeks, but the scandal of the wedding spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered on sidewalks, co-workers sent sympathetic looks, and even in the grocery store, Vivian felt the weight of stares. Samuel carried himself with quiet dignity, but the whispers reached him too. Some pitied him, others mocked him for losing face. One evening, Ruth returned, carrying papers. She set them on the kitchen table, her smile sharp as glass. This is your chance, Samuel. Sell the house. End all this shame. People are laughing at you. Use Maria's estate to start fresh somewhere else. Samuel stared at her. This house is where Vivian grew up. It's where Maria's memory lives. I will never sell it. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Stubborn fool. Don't come crying to me when you lose everything. She snatched the papers back and stormed out. Vivian sat silently, tears in her eyes. Dad, why is everyone so cruel? Samuel sighed, placing a hand over hers. Because cruelty is easy, Princess. But we're not here to choose what's easy. We're here to choose what's right. That night, alone in his garage, Samuel sat on his workbench, staring at the motorcycle parts scattered before him. The world felt like it was closing in greedy relatives, a humiliated daughter, neighbors whispering. But in his heart, he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a battle, one that would test not just his strength, but the bond between father and daughter. And Samuel Reyes had never walked away from a fight worth winning. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains of the Reyes home, casting long streaks across the living room. Vivian sat with a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring into her coffee cup as though the swirling liquid might offer answers. Samuel, already dressed in his work overalls, gently placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. Eat something, princess. You'll need your strength. Vivian shook her head. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. The way he looked at me, like I was something to be owned, not loved. Samuel pulled up a chair, his tired eyes softening. That's because he doesn't understand love. Love isn't power or control. It's sacrifice. It's what your mother gave me, and what I'd give for you without hesitation. Vivian looked at him, her lip trembling. Then why does it still hurt so much? Samuel reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Because your heart is real, and real hearts break. That evening, a knock came at the door. Samuel opened it, and there stood Jasper, dressed immaculately in a navy suit, holding a bouquet of white roses. His expression was carefully crafted, a mask of remorse. Vivian, Jasper began, ignoring Samuel completely. I've come to apologize. I lost control that night. I let the pressure get to me. But I love you. I can't live without you. Vivian appeared in the hallway, pale and weary. She stiffened at the sight of him, clutching her blanket tighter. Jasper, you hurt me, she whispered. I know, he said quickly, stepping forward. And I hate myself for it. Please, let me make it up to you. We can start over, just us, away from all this chaos. I'll give you the life you deserve. Samuel's voice cut through the room, low and steady. She already has the life she deserves, one without you in it. Jasper's jaw tightened, but his smile never faltered. With all due respect, Mr. Reyes, you're standing in the way of your daughter's happiness. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. No, Jasper. My father is the only one who's ever stood for my happiness. Leave us alone. For a moment, Jasper's mask cracked, and Samuel saw the fury beneath. But Jasper forced himself to bow his head slightly. Very well, if that's what you want. He placed the roses on the table and walked out, his polished shoes echoing on the porch. Samuel picked up the bouquet and tossed it straight into the trash. Poison, he muttered. Meanwhile, the storm brewing within the family deepened. Ruth and her husband gathered with two other relatives at a downtown cafe, spreading out documents across the table. This is our chance, Ruth hissed. Samuel's reputation is in shambles. His daughter's a laughingstock. He can't possibly defend Maria's estate against us. Her cousin Hector nodded. I've already spoken to a lawyer. If we argue that Samuel mismanaged Maria's assets, we could force a sale of the property. Vivian would have no choice but to comply. And the garage? Ruth asked eagerly. Gone. Bulldozed. The land alone is worth a fortune. They clinked their coffee cups like conspirators sealing a deal, unaware that a waitress nearby was listening with wide eyes. Back at home, Samuel noticed changes in the neighborhood. Friends who once greeted him warmly now crossed the street. Customers at the garage dwindled. Some mumbled excuses about going elsewhere, Others avoided his gaze entirely. One afternoon, a man he'd known for years leaned against the garage doorway, arms crossed. "Sam, you should have handled your daughter better. Everyone says you drove Jasper away, and with him, all the opportunities. That boy had connections. You could have had contracts lined up for months." Samuel wiped grease from his hands, his temper simmering. "I don't need contracts bought with my daughter's misery," the man scoffed. "Suit yourself. But don't expect anyone to stand by you when the bank comes calling." He walked away, leaving Samuel with a hollow ache in his chest. Vivian, too, felt the sting of betrayal. Old friends stopped returning her calls. Her boss at the design studio quietly reduced her hours, claiming budget cuts. Even the church she attended with her father seemed colder, the congregation whispering behind hymn books. One night, she sat on the porch steps, staring at the darkened street. "Dad, why does it feel like the whole world turned against us?" Samuel sat beside her, the night air carrying the scent of gasoline from the garage. "Because we refuse to kneel to their false gods, money, status, appearances, and people hate what they can't control." Vivian leaned against him, silent tears sliding down her face. "I'm scared." Samuel wrapped an arm around her. "Then we'll face the fear together." But danger was closer than either of them realized. 2 nights later, Samuel returned from the garage to find their mailbox stuffed with envelopes. Legal notices, threats of foreclosure, petitions from relatives demanding access to Maria's assets. At the very top of the pile lay a handwritten note, the ink pressed hard into the paper. "You think you've won, but this is only the beginning. J." Samuel's fists clenched. For the first time in years, he felt a fire burning inside him, not just anger, but determination. They wanted to strip him of his dignity, his home, his daughter's peace. But they had underestimated Samuel Reyes. The days that followed were a relentless storm. Vivian woke each morning to the sound of her father rustling through stacks of papers at the kitchen table. Envelopes, notices, official letters, all demanding responses, all threatening consequences. His once steady hands now trembled slightly as he sorted through them, though he tried to hide it whenever she entered the room. "More threats?" she asked quietly, setting a mug of tea beside him. Samuel gave a short nod. "Lawyers this time. Ruth and her lot are contesting Maria's estate. They claim I mishandled her finances and that the property should be liquidated for fair distribution." His voice dripped with disgust. Vivian sank into the chair opposite him. "That's insane. Mom left everything to you. Everyone knows that." "Knowing it and proving it in court are two different things," Samuel muttered, rubbing his temples. "They've got money for lawyers. I've got grease on my hands." That evening, Jasper made his move. Vivian's phone buzzed with a message. "Meet me. Just one conversation. You'll regret it if you don't." She stared at the screen, her pulse racing. Part of her wanted to delete it and never look back. Another part, the part still tangled in memories of soft words and promises of forever, hesitated. When she showed Samuel, his jaw tightened. "He's trying to worm his way back in. Don't give him the satisfaction." "I won't," Vivian said firmly. But later that night, alone in her room, she found herself scrolling through old photos. Jasper smiling, Jasper holding her hand, Jasper whispering something that made her laugh. She closed the phone quickly, ashamed of the ache she still felt. Meanwhile, Ruth and her allies grew bolder. They showed up unannounced at the garage one afternoon, dressed in expensive coats, their lawyer trailing behind them with a briefcase. Customers scattered as the group entered, their voices sharp. "Samuel, Ruth began, her eyes gleaming. "We've given you enough time. Sign over the deed to Maria's house, and we'll settle quietly. Drag this out, and you'll lose everything in court." Samuel straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "You vultures circle too soon. Maria's house isn't yours to claim." Ruth smirked. "That garage of yours barely keeps the lights on. How will you afford a lawyer? How will you pay court fees, debts, penalties?" The lawyer stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Reyes, my clients have a strong case. If you wish to avoid public embarrassment, I suggest cooperation. Otherwise, you may find not only your wife's estate, but this business under scrutiny." Vivian, who had been helping at the register, slammed her fist on the counter. "My mother's memory is not for sale." Ruth's smirk faltered for a second, but then she leaned in close to Samuel. "Memories don't pay bills. Think about it." She turned sharply and left, her entourage following like shadows. As the weeks passed, isolation deepened. The garage lost more customers, some lured away by competitors Jasper quietly funded. Neighbors whispered louder, some openly mocking Samuel for clinging to pride while his world crumbled. At night, when the house was quiet, Samuel often stood at the window, staring at the dark street. He thought of Maria, her gentle hand on his shoulder, her unwavering faith in him. "How would you face this, love?" he whispered into the silence. Vivian noticed the exhaustion in his eyes, the slump in his shoulders. One night she found him sitting at the table long after midnight, head in his hands. "Dad, maybe we should settle. Just give them what they want. At least then it'll be over." Samuel looked up sharply. "And let them win? Let them take everything your mother and I built with our bare hands? No, Vivian. That's what they want to break us. But I'll die standing before I live on my knees." Vivian's throat tightened, torn between fear and pride. "I don't want to lose you, Dad." He reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You won't." "Not while I can still fight." The breaking point came on a cold Saturday morning. Samuel arrived at the garage to find the windows shattered, oil cans spilled across the floor, tools missing. Spray painted across the brick wall in dripping red letters were the words, "Broken men break families." Vivian gasped when she saw it. "Dad, who would do this?" Samuel stared at the message, fury building in his chest. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. Jasper had crossed a line. Samuel clenched his fists. For years he had endured hardship with quiet dignity, swallowing his anger, putting his family first. But now, staring at the ruin of his livelihood, he felt something shift deep inside him. They wanted war, and Samuel Reyes was ready to give it to them. The morning after the garage attack, Samuel stood outside in the brittle cold, surveying the wreckage. Broken glass glittered in the sunlight, the spray-painted insult glaring like a fresh wound. Vivian stood beside him, hugging her coat tightly, waiting for him to say something. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without warning, he grabbed a bucket of soapy water, a stiff brush, and began scrubbing the wall. "Dad, wait! We should call the police." "They won't do a damn thing," Samuel cut in, his voice hard. "This is our fight." "And they think this will scare me?" "No, Mija. This only makes me stronger." Vivian watched as his hands cracked and rough from years of labor, scoured at the hateful words until the water ran red with paint. His shoulders straightened, his movements sharp with determination. She realized then they hadn't broken him, they had awakened him. That afternoon, Samuel marched into a local law office with Vivian at his side. The receptionist looked up, startled at the sight of the grease-stained man carrying a folder stuffed with papers. "I need to speak to someone who still believes in justice," Samuel said firmly. An older attorney named Helen Duval, known for taking on impossible cases, agreed to meet them. She listened quietly as Samuel laid everything out: the will, Ruth's accusations, the harassment, even the sabotage of his garage. When he finished, Helen leaned back in her chair, studying him. "They've got money, connections, but," she tapped the folder, "you've got truth, and sometimes truth can win if we fight smart." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I don't need easy. I just need someone who won't fold when they turn up the heat." Helen gave a thin smile. "Then you've come to the right place." Word spread quickly. Within days, Jasper received notice that Samuel was countersuing for harassment, property damage, and defamation. Ruth's smug confidence faltered as subpoenas arrived at her doorstep. For the first time, the vultures realized Samuel wasn't going to roll over. The community, once eager to gossip and sneer, began to take notice too. When Samuel showed up at Sunday service with Vivian, heads turned. Some whispered still, but others nodded respectfully, even offered quiet words of support. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jasper, however, was far from finished. At a lavish dinner with Ruth and her allies, he slammed his glass down, fury flashing in his eyes. "He dares drag me into court? Me? That broke mechanic should have stayed in his hole." Ruth smirked, though her hands fidgeted with her pearls. "Calm yourself, Jasper. If Samuel wants war, then war he'll get. We'll bury him in legal fees. By the time this is over, he won't even have a roof left to stand under." Jasper leaned back, eyes glinting coldly. "Number? That's too slow. He humiliated me once. At my own wedding. I want him crushed publicly. I want him begging." The room fell silent. Then Ruth smiled faintly. "So be it." Back at the Reyes home, Samuel worked longer hours, repairing the garage himself, while Vivian organized their case with Helen. Nights were spent hunched over documents, tracing every financial record Maria had left, every receipt, every letter that proved Samuel's honesty. Vivian marveled at her father's resolve. "You're not just fighting them, are you?" she asked one night. Samuel looked up from a stack of papers. "Number, I'm fighting for your mother's memory, for the life we built, for you. If I let them win, then everything we've sacrificed is for nothing." Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them. "Then we'll win, together." The first court hearing was small, procedural, but it marked a turning point. Ruth arrived with her lawyer and entourage, dressed like royalty, her nose tilted high. Jasper sat beside her, perfectly tailored, smirking as though victory were already his. Samuel walked in wearing his one good suit, Vivian steadying him at his side. He looked tired, but his eyes burned with quiet fire. When the judge called the case, Helen rose with calm authority. "Your Honor, my client Samuel Reyes has been subject to relentless harassment, baseless accusations, and targeted destruction of his livelihood. Today, we begin not only to defend his rights, but to expose the lies meant to strip him of his dignity." Ruth's smirk faltered. Jasper's jaw clenched. For the first time, the battlefield had shifted. That evening, as they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. "Mr. Reyes, are you really going up against the Hale family? Do you think you can win? Is it true you've lost everything?" Samuel paused at the top of the courthouse steps. Vivian's hand tightened around his arm. He could have kept walking, but instead, he turned to face the cameras. "I'm not here to win riches," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because my wife's memory deserves respect, because no family should be torn apart by greed. They think I'm just a broken man. But let me tell you, broken men don't break, they build, and I will keep building until the truth is seen." The crowd fell silent for a beat before the questions resumed, louder than before. But Samuel kept walking, his chin high. Vivian looked at him with something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Yet, as father and daughter turned the corner, away from the crowd, a black car idled across the street. Inside, Jasper watched, his lips curling into a cold smile. "This isn't over, old man," he murmured. "You just declared war." 2 weeks after the first court hearing, Samuel awoke to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. He reached for it, half expecting another message from Helen, but what he saw instead made his blood run cold. Local news headline: "Mechanic turned conman?" Sources claim Samuel Reyes stole inheritance from late wife's family. Beneath the headline was his own face, an old photograph, weary from long nights at the shop. The article painted him as a manipulator who had taken advantage of Maria's illness to seize control of her assets, while her grieving family noble, respected Ruth, and her devoted son-in-law, Jasper, supposedly fought for justice. Vivian stormed into the kitchen minutes later, clutching her phone. "Dad, this is everywhere online, television, even the neighborhood boards. They're calling you a thief." Samuel's jaw clenched. He hadn't stolen a thing, but Jasper and Ruth's wealth had bought them the loudest megaphones in the city. At the garage, customers stopped coming. Cars that were once lined up outside now went elsewhere. A few loyal clients remained, but even they avoided eye contact, nervous about being associated with a criminal. One afternoon, Samuel caught sight of two teenage boys loitering across the street, filming him with their phones. When he confronted them, they just laughed and shouted, "Hey, thief, where's the money?" Before running off, Vivian wanted to fight back immediately. "We should go to the press ourselves, clear your name." But Helen shook her head. "Not yet. The court is where the truth matters. If we react too quickly, they'll twist it into desperation." Samuel frowned. "So we just let them spit on our name?" "For now," Helen said softly. "Sometimes patience is the deadliest weapon." Jasper, meanwhile, reveled in the storm he'd created. At his downtown office, he scrolled through the online comments with smug satisfaction. "Look at this," he said to Ruth, turning his laptop toward her. "Half the city thinks Samuel's a crook. The other half thinks he's pathetic. Either way, his reputation is dust." Ruth smiled thinly, sipping her wine. "Just as planned." But Jasper wasn't satisfied. "I want more. I want him ruined in every corner of his life. If his friends won't turn on him, we'll buy someone who will." Days later, Samuel received a visit from a man he hadn't seen in years. Miguel Torres, his old business partner from when they'd first opened the garage. Miguel had left years ago after an argument about money, but he now showed up with a strange urgency. "Sam," Miguel said, eyes darting nervously, "we need to talk." At first, it felt like a reconciliation. Miguel apologized for the past, said he'd been foolish to leave, and offered to help rebuild the garage's reputation. Samuel, cautious but hopeful, allowed him back into the fold. For a brief moment, it felt like the tide might be turning. But then came the betrayal. Late one night, Samuel walked into the garage to find Miguel rifling through his filing cabinet. When confronted, Miguel stammered excuses, but in his hands were Samuel's private documents, bills, receipts, even correspondence with Helen. It didn't take long to realize Miguel had been bought. Jasper promised me enough to start my own shop, Miguel admitted, shame in his eyes. I'm sorry, Sam. I just couldn't say no. Samuel's hands shook with rage. Get out, and don't ever show your face again. The next morning, the leaked documents appeared online, twisted into more evidence of fraud. Every detail, even innocent ones, was spun into something sinister. Vivian broke down in tears when she saw her mother's letters misquoted in the news. They're turning her words into lies, she whispered. Samuel held her close, though his own heart ached. They can twist paper, Hija, but they can't twist the truth, not forever. But the smear campaign didn't stop at headlines. Ruth and Jasper began whispering into the ears of landlords, suppliers, even Samuel's bank. Suddenly, his line of credit was frozen. Part shipments were mysteriously delayed. Bills piled higher and higher. It wasn't just about winning a case anymore, it was about strangling him into surrender. One evening, Samuel sat at the kitchen table with unopened envelopes scattered across it. Vivian watched him in silence, worry etched across her face. Finally, she asked, "What if we can't win?" Samuel looked at her, eyes weary but unbroken. "Then we fight anyway, because once you stop fighting, you've already lost." In a penthouse high above the city, Jasper poured himself a drink and stared out over the skyline. "He's barely holding on," he said, almost to himself. "One more push, and he'll collapse." Ruth nodded, though unease flickered briefly across her face. "Be careful, Jasper. Cornered men can be dangerous." Jasper smirked, lifting his glass. "And broken men are harmless. By the time I'm done, Samuel Reyes won't even remember what dignity feels like." But in his arrogance, Jasper failed to see what Vivian saw that night, a flicker in Samuel's eyes, not of defeat, but of resolve hardening into something unshakable. They hadn't broken him. They'd lit a fire he hadn't felt in years. For days, the smear campaign chewed away at Samuel's reputation like rust on metal. Neighbors avoided him, clients disappeared, and even friends grew silent. But beneath the weight of humiliation, something inside Samuel began to shift. Late one night, while sifting through the scattered documents Jasper's people had twisted into lies, Samuel noticed something. A receipt, a small, almost forgotten detail from Maria's final hospital stay. It wasn't the paper itself that mattered, but the handwriting on it. Dr. Evelyn Chan's signature. She had been Maria's attending physician, compassionate and precise. Samuel remembered her clearly, a woman who had looked him in the eye and promised Maria's treatment would be handled fairly. If anyone could prove the lies about Maria's stolen inheritance false, it was her. The next morning, Samuel went to the hospital. The receptionist tried to brush him off. "Doctor, Chan isn't available for unscheduled visitors." But when Samuel explained, his voice cracking with both grief and urgency, a quiet nurse whispered, "She still remembers your wife. Wait here." Minutes later, Dr. Chan appeared, older, but still carrying the same calm authority. "Mr. Reyes," she said softly, "I'm sorry for your loss. I remember Maria well. She was remarkable." "Mr. Reyes." Samuel swallowed hard. "Doctor, they're saying I stole from her family, that I manipulated her estate. You know that's a lie. Please, will you tell the truth?" Dr. Chan hesitated, glancing around. "I shouldn't be involved. But," she lowered her voice, "there were irregularities in the paperwork after Maria passed. I noticed, but Ruth Hale pressured the administration to leave it alone. If this comes to light, it could expose everything." Samuel's heart pounded. Proof. Finally, a crack in Ruth and Jasper's perfect facade. That night, Samuel told Vivian and Helen what Dr. Chan had revealed. Vivian's eyes blazed. So it was Ruth all along. She tampered with Mom's records. Helen leaned forward. If we can get Dr. Chan's testimony, the court won't just dismiss their claims, it'll turn the case against them. For the first time in weeks, hope surged through Samuel. They tried to bury me in lies. But now we can fight back. Meanwhile, Jasper celebrated at a lavish dinner party with investors. The smear campaign had worked beautifully. Samuel was nearly ruined, and Jasper's business allies applauded his ruthlessness. But Ruth wasn't smiling. She lingered in the corner, sipping her wine with a troubled expression. Jasper noticed. Why the long face, Mother? We're winning. Ruth's voice was cool but sharp. You may think so, but Samuel isn't a fool, and Maria's memory won't stay buried forever. Jasper smirked. Memories don't win battles. Power does. Ruth looked away, concealing her unease. For the first time, she wondered if Jasper's arrogance might one day undo them both. The turning point came a week later at the next hearing. Ruth's lawyers presented more evidence against Samuel, twisted documents, fabricated timelines, and Miguel's false testimony. The judge seemed unconvinced, but the weight of accusations still loomed heavy. Then Helen stood and calmly said, Your Honor, we have a witness. All eyes turned as Dr. Evelyn Chan entered the courtroom. Her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Under oath, she spoke with quiet authority. I was Maria Reyes's physician during her final months. I can confirm that Samuel Reyes never interfered with her medical or financial affairs. However, she paused, glancing at Ruth. I did witness attempts by Ruth Hale to pressure the hospital into altering documentation related to Maria's estate. I filed a private report at the time, which I have submitted today. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jasper stiffened, his jaw tightening. Ruth's hands trembled ever so slightly. Samuel sat straighter, dignity restored. For the first time, the truth was no longer just his word against theirs. After the session, Jasper cornered Ruth in the hallway, his face red with fury. How could you let this happen? He hissed. Ruth glared back. Don't you dare blame me. You're the one parading around like a king while the foundations crack beneath us. Jasper leaned in closer, his voice venomous. Then fix it, or I'll fix it for both of us permanently. For the first time, Ruth felt fear not of Samuel, but of her own son-in-law. That night, Samuel sat at the kitchen table with Vivian and Helen. The weight of weeks of torment was still there, but something new pulsed beneath it. Momentum. Vivian smiled faintly. We actually hurt them today, didn't we? Samuel nodded. One crack at a time. And soon, their whole empire will come down. Helen leaned back, studying him with admiration. I told you, Sam. Patience. Let them underestimate you. That's when you strike. Outside, the city lights glimmered. For the first time since Maria's passing, Samuel felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting, and he wasn't fighting alone. But in the shadows of a penthouse balcony, Jasper lit a cigar, eyes cold with rage. You want a war, Samuel? He muttered to the night. Then you'll have one. And with that, the battle lines were redrawn. The victory in court lifted Samuel's spirit, but it also painted a red target on his back. Jasper was no longer just irritated, he was humiliated. And men like Jasper never tolerated humiliation. At the Ray's home, the mood was lighter for the first time in weeks. Vivian set out dinner while Samuel fixed a leaky faucet. Helen teased him about finally smiling again. It almost felt normal. But deep down, Samuel knew it wouldn't last. That night, after Vivian went upstairs, Helen pulled Samuel aside. You know Jasper won't let this go. You exposed his mother in front of the whole court. He'll come at you harder now. Samuel sighed. I know. But for the first time, I feel like we can win. I just, I don't want Vivian to suffer more. Helen's expression softened. Then be ready, Sam, because if Jasper can't break you, he'll go after her. 2 days later, Vivian received an invitation, an elegant envelope embossed with silver trim. Inside was a card from Jasper himself. Vivian, you are still my wife. Nothing can change that. I want to speak with you, alone. Come to the Riverside Hotel tomorrow night. No lawyers, no father, just us. If you refuse, I will make things far worse for Samuel. Think carefully. Vivian's hands trembled as she read the note. She wanted to tear it to pieces, but her father's name glared back at her. The threat was clear. That evening, she showed Samuel the letter. His face went pale with fury. He dares? After everything, he dares threaten you like this? Vivian's voice cracked. Dad, what if he means it? What if he ruins you completely? Samuel slammed his fist on the table. I won't let him. You are not meeting that man. But Vivian's eyes filled with guilt. What if I don't? He destroys you. Maybe I should go. Maybe I can... No! Samuel snapped, louder than he intended. Then, softer, almost pleading. Vivian, I've lost too much already. I won't lose you to him, not like this. Helen stepped in, steady and practical. He's setting a trap. If you go alone, he'll twist it against you. But maybe we can turn his trap against him. The next night, Vivian walked into the Riverside Hotel lobby. She wore a plain dress, her face pale but resolute. From across the marble floor, Jasper appeared in a sharp black suit, smiling as if nothing had happened. Vivian, he said smoothly, extending a hand. Still as beautiful as ever. Vivian didn't take it. What do you want, Jasper? Jasper's smile widened. To remind you of your place. You're my wife. That old man of yours can't change that. Divorce? Annulment? Court battles? They mean nothing if I say they mean nothing. Vivian's voice shook. You don't own me! But Jasper leaned closer, his tone dropping. Don't I? You saw how easily I destroyed your father's reputation. Imagine what I could do to you. To him, unless... His fingers brushed the table between them. You come back to me willingly. Vivian recoiled. Never. For the first time, Jasper's mask cracked, anger flashing in his eyes. Then your father pays the price. Unbeknownst to Jasper, Helen had anticipated his arrogance. Hidden in the corner of the hotel bar sat a quiet man in a baseball cap, an old friend of hers, now a private investigator. His recorder captured every word Jasper spoke. When Vivian returned home that night, shaken but unbroken, Samuel was waiting. She threw her arms around him, crying into his chest. He's worse than I thought, Dad. He doesn't want me. He just wants to destroy you. Samuel held her tight, his jaw clenched. Then Helen laid a small device on the table. He's finished, she said. Vivian blinked. What is that? Proof, Helen replied. Every threat he made, every word. Now it's not just your word against his. We can bury him with this. For the first time, Samuel's eyes burned not with fear, but with resolve. They wanted to break us, he said, but now we have something they can't twist. But far above the city, in his penthouse, Jasper poured himself a glass of scotch. He stared out at the skyline, unaware that his arrogance had just armed his enemies. "Play your little games, Samuel," he muttered. "I've only just begun." And in the shadows behind him, Ruth Hale spoke for the first time in hours. "Careful, Jasper. When men fly too close to the sun, they burn." Jasper turned, his smile cold. "Then let them burn first." The recording sat on the kitchen table like a live grenade. Vivian couldn't stop staring at it. The tiny device contained Jasper's threats, his arrogance, his venom. Proof that he wasn't just cruel, he was dangerous. Samuel turned it over in his hand, jaw tight. This could end him. No judge, no lawyer, no bribe could make this disappear. Helen leaned forward. "If we release it carefully, it won't just protect you in court. It will destroy him in the public eye. Men like Jasper survive on reputation. Strip that away, and he's nothing." Vivian chewed her lip. "But what if he retaliates? What if he hurts you even worse?" Samuel looked at his daughter, his weathered face softening. "He already tried. He broke my shop, my name, nearly my will. What more can he take?" "No, Vivian. This time, we hit back." The next morning, Samuel's lawyer received the file. Within hours, discreet copies had been sent to a family court judge, to a journalist Helen trusted, and to a handful of business partners Jasper had been courting. By evening, whispers rippled across the city. Jasper's voice, smooth, arrogant, threatening to own his wife and destroy her father, leaked into inboxes and phones. It was undeniable. The newspaper headline the next day read, "Prominent entrepreneur caught threatening wife and father-in-law in secret recording." The fallout was immediate. At Jasper's office, phones rang off the hook. Investors pulled out, clients severed ties. His staff avoided eye contact, afraid of the storm brewing in their boss's office. He slammed the recording onto his desk, his face twisted with rage. "Who did this?" he roared. "Who?" His assistant stammered. It's everywhere, sir. We can't stop it." Jasper hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering like his crumbling reputation. "Samuel!" he hissed. "That bastard thinks he's won!" From the corner, Ruth watched silently, her eyes sharp. "I warned you. Pride always makes the knife easier to find." Jasper turned on her. "Don't you dare lecture me. This isn't over. If they want war, I'll show them war." Back at the Reyes home, relief swept over Vivian like sunlight after weeks of storm. Neighbors who once whispered behind their backs now avoided their gaze out of shame. Samuel's garage began to see familiar customers return, offering quiet words of support. "People finally see him for what he is," Vivian said, clutching Helen's hand. But Helen remained cautious. Men like Jasper don't vanish because of one headline. He's bleeding now, yes, but a wounded predator is the most dangerous kind. Samuel nodded grimly. "Then let him come. He thinks he can scare us into silence. But now, everyone knows the truth." That night, Jasper made his move. Vivian was locking up the garage office when she noticed a shadow across the lot. She froze, clutching her bag. The figure stepped forward, Jasper, his suit disheveled, eyes bloodshot, fury radiating from him. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You humiliate me in front of the whole city? You ruin everything I've built?" Vivian's breath quickened. "Stay away from me, Jasper. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Oh, but you should be. His voice dropped to a chilling calm. You think your father can protect you? That recording won't save him when I drag his past into the light. Vivian frowned. What are you talking about? Jasper smirked. Ask him. Ask him what happened in San Isidro 20 years ago. Ask him why your mother's family never forgave him. Vivian's heart lurched. You're lying. Am I? Jasper leaned closer, his voice venomous. Your father hides behind his halo of honesty, but dirt always seeps through, and when I uncover it, you'll see he's no better than me. Before she could reply, headlights flooded the lot. Samuel's truck screeched to a halt, and he leapt out, fury blazing in his eyes. Get away from my daughter, he shouted. Jasper smirked, stepping back slowly into the shadows. Careful, old man. You've declared war, and war always digs up graves. He disappeared into the night, leaving Vivian trembling not just from fear, but from doubt now clawing at her heart. She turned to Samuel, her voice breaking. Dad, what did he mean? What happened in San Isidro? Samuel's face hardened, the old pain flashing in his eyes. For the first time, he looked away from her. That, he said quietly, is a story I prayed you'd never have to hear. Vivian couldn't sleep. Jasper's words echoed in her skull like a curse. San Isidro, 20 years ago. Graves. She sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at her father's closed door. Part of her wanted to shake him awake and demand the truth. But another part, the frightened, childlike part, dreaded the answer. Morning came heavy with silence. Samuel sat at the table, hands folded, eyes shadowed. He had barely touched his breakfast. Vivian finally broke. Dad, she whispered, what happened in San Isidro? Samuel's hand trembled as he set down his coffee. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, his voice cracked low and tired. Vivian, I was young, foolish, and I made mistakes that cost lives. Her heart lurched. Lives? Samuel nodded, eyes glassy. Before you were born, I worked at a construction site in San Isidro. It was supposed to be a new housing project, something honest. But the company cut corners. Safety rules ignored. Materials cheapened. We workers knew it was dangerous, but we had mouths to feed. His voice faltered. One day, the scaffolding collapsed. 2 men died. Others were crippled. The company buried it, paid off families with scraps. And he swallowed hard, shame etched into every line of his face. I signed the report that said it was an accident. I was the foreman. My signature kept the company safe, kept me employed. Vivian's breath hitched. You covered it up? Tears welled in Samuel's eyes. I was desperate. Your mother was sick. We had nothing. I told myself it was survival. But those men, they never saw justice. He buried his face in his hands. That's what Jasper meant. He must have dug it up. He'll twist it into proof that I'm no better than him. Vivian sat frozen. Her father, her rock, her moral compass carrying such a stain? Dad, she whispered, why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to see me as the man I should have been, Samuel choked out. That afternoon, Vivian's worst fear came true. The headlines blared. Heroic father or liar, leaked documents reveal. Samuel Reyes covered up deadly collapse in San Isidro. Attached were old reports, Samuel's signature at the bottom, and Jasper's fingerprints were all over the leak. Within hours, whispers began again, crueler this time. Customers vanished. Neighbors avoided their eyes. The fragile hope they had built after Jasper's downfall cracked beneath the weight of Samuel's past. At the garage, Samuel stared at the empty lot, shoulders slumped. "He's right," he muttered. "I'm no different. I hid the truth. Men died, Vivian. Their families never got justice because of me." Vivian grabbed his arm, tears spilling. "Don't you say that. You are nothing like him. You regret what you did. You carried that guilt every day. Jasper destroys lives and sleeps well at night. That's the difference." But Samuel shook his head. "It doesn't matter. To the world, I'm just another liar. And now, I've dragged you down with me." Meanwhile, across town, Jasper sat in his office, his reputation wounded but his grin triumphant. He raised a glass of scotch. "Checkmate, old man. You may have clipped my wings, but now the world sees your halo's nothing but rust." Ruth Hale watched him from the shadows, lips curled in a thin smile. "Careful, Jasper. Corpses have a way of clawing back to the surface when you dance on their graves." But Jasper only laughed. "Let them claw. I've already won. Vivian will never look at her father the same again." That night, Vivian sat beside Samuel on the porch. Crickets sang, the air heavy with sorrow. "Dad," she said softly, "you taught me something Jasper never understood. People fail. People fall. But only cowards stay down." Samuel turned, eyes weary. "Vivian." She held his hand tight. "You can make this right. Not for Jasper. Not for the world. For the families who lost everything. Tell the truth. Give them the justice you couldn't 20 years ago." For the first time since the story broke, Samuel's eyes flickered with a spark fragile but real. "You think it's not too late?" he asked. Vivian pressed his hand to her heart. "It's never too late." And in that moment, Samuel Reyes made a silent vow. Jasper may have dug up his sins, but he would turn that wound into a weapon, not to destroy, but to finally heal. 2 days later, the town hall was packed. Word had spread quickly. Samuel Reyes was going to speak publicly. Some came to gawk at his downfall, others out of morbid curiosity, and a few out of quiet loyalty. Vivian stood at his side, her hand gripping his arm. She had begged him not to face it alone. When Samuel stepped onto the podium, murmurs rippled through the crowd. He looked older, worn, but his eyes carried a steady fire. He cleared his throat, gripping the microphone. "My name is Samuel Reyes. Many of you know me as a mechanic, a father, a neighbor. But 20 years ago, in San Isidro, I made a choice that has haunted me every day since." The room fell silent. Even the reporters leaned in. "I was a foreman on a construction site. The company cut corners. We all knew it was dangerous. One day, the scaffolding collapsed. 2 men died. Their families never saw justice. And do you know why?" He held up a faded document, trembling in his hand. "Because I signed the report that called it an accident. I kept my job. I kept food on my family's table. But in doing so, I stole justice from theirs." Gasps broke out. Samuel's voice cracked, but he pressed on. "I am not proud of it. I am not excusing it. I am telling you the truth because I am done hiding. If those families are here, or if they hear this, I am sorry. I cannot bring back your loved ones. But I will spend the rest of my life making it right, however I can." He lowered the paper, his shoulders heavy but his face clear of shame for the first time in years. "If that makes me a fraud, so be it. but I'd rather live as a flawed man who admits his sins than a coward who hides them. The hall erupted, voices clashing, some condemning, some applauding. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vivian stepped up beside her father, her voice shaking but firm. This is the difference between him and Jasper. My father confesses. Jasper destroys. One buries mistakes, the other buries people. Now you all know the truth. You choose which man you'll believe in. That night, the headlines shifted. Samuel Reyes confesses past cover-up, offers public apology to victims' families. And beneath it, a striking contrast. Reyes faces mistakes. Jasper Hale remains silent amid allegations. The families of the victims came forward. Two widows, their faces lined with years of quiet grief, stood before Samuel days later. "You can't bring them back," one said, her voice raw. "But you stood here, and you said what no one else dared to. That means something." The other nodded. "If you want to make it right, help us fight the company that ruined us. They still build, still profit. We never had the strength to fight them alone. Maybe now, with you." Tears slid down Samuel's cheeks. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I'll stand with you." Vivian squeezed his hand, pride swelling in her chest. Her father was no longer a man buried in shame. He was a man standing in the light of truth. Meanwhile, Jasper's office was a storm. "What do you mean people are sympathizing with him?" he bellowed at Ruth, slamming the paper onto his desk. "He admitted guilt! He should be finished!" Ruth raised an eyebrow. "You still don't understand people, Jasper. They don't love perfection. They love redemption. Samuel bared his scars. You only sharpen your knives. Tell me, which one inspires loyalty?" Jasper's jaw tightened. "I'll destroy him another way. If the past won't kill him, I'll make sure the present does." Ruth's smile was thin, knowing. "Be careful. You've already set the town on fire. Don't let the flames swallow you too." But Jasper didn't hear her. He was already plotting. That evening, Samuel, Vivian, and Helen sat together at the kitchen table. The first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. "You did it, Dad," Vivian whispered. "You turned his weapon against you into your strength." Samuel shook his head. "No, Vivian, we did it. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And Helen, thank you for standing by us." Helen smiled faintly. "Truth is always sharper than lies. Jasper won't stop, but he's bleeding, and bleeding men grow desperate." Vivian's stomach tightened at the warning. She looked out the window into the dark night beyond, and for the first time she wondered, what will Jasper do when he has nothing left to lose? Jasper Hale stared out his office window, the city lights glowing like embers. His reflection in the glass was gaunt, haunted, the image of a man unraveling. He slammed his fist on the desk. "They should hate him. They should despise him. Instead, they call him brave." His phone buzzed. It was one of his allies, or rather, the last one who hadn't yet abandoned him. "They're pulling contracts, Jasper," the voice muttered nervously. "Investors don't like the heat. We're bleeding money." Jasper's grip tightened. "Then we take the last thing Samuel Reyes has, his daughter." Silence on the other end. Then, "You don't mean—" "I mean ruin her the way he ruined me. She's the only reason he hasn't collapsed already. Take her away, and he'll crumble." The line went dead, his contact unwilling to hear more. Jasper smirked. Cowards. If no one else would stand with him, he'd stand alone. And when Vivian was finished, Samuel would break forever. That same night, Vivian walked home from the garage. Samuel had stayed late, working on an old pickup, saying he needed the noise to quiet his mind. The streets were dim, the lamps flickering. She felt the prickle of eyes on her back, but saw nothing. Her pace quickened. Then a black car screeched around the corner, headlights cutting across the pavement. The door flung open, and two men stepped out, faces obscured by masks. Vivian froze. "Miss Reyes," one of them hissed. "Your father's sins have a price." Her heart thundered. She spun to run, but one man grabbed her arm. Before he could drag her, a voice boomed from the shadows. "Let her go." It was Samuel, grease still smeared on his shirt, wrench in hand, eyes blazing with a father's fury. He swung with raw strength, striking the masked man across the jaw. The man stumbled, cursing. Vivian tore free, and Samuel shoved her behind him. "You want to punish someone? Punish me," Samuel shouted. The other man lunged, pulling a knife. Vivian screamed, but headlights cut through the night again. A truck skidded to a halt, and out stormed Helen Cruz, pistol drawn. "Drop it!" she barked, her voice commanding, sharp as steel. The men hesitated. Then, realizing they were outnumbered, they bolted back into the car and sped off, tires screeching into the night. Vivian collapsed against her father, shaking violently. Samuel wrapped her in his arms, his hands trembling as much as hers. "They were going to take me," she gasped. "I won't let them," Samuel swore, his voice breaking. "Not while I still breathe." Helen's eyes narrowed at the retreating car. "That wasn't random. That was a message. Jasper's fingerprints are all over this." The next morning, Vivian tried to hide the bruises on her arm, but Samuel noticed every mark. Guilt burned in his chest. "This is my fault," he muttered. "I should have ended this before it touched you." Vivian gripped his hand. "No, Dad, this is his fault. Don't let him twist that truth. If he wants to destroy us, we'll show him we're unbreakable." Helen leaned across the table, eyes sharp. "Jasper's losing his grip. A man that desperate makes mistakes. We'll use that. But Samuel, you need to be ready. He's not going to stop until one of you is finished." Samuel's gaze hardened. "Then let him come. I'm done running." Meanwhile, Jasper paced in his penthouse, fury boiling. "They were supposed to bring her," he snapped at the two bruised men kneeling before him. "Instead, you failed against an old man and a washed-up reporter? One spat blood. You didn't tell us they'd fight like demons. The girl isn't weak, and her father should have been broken by now," Jasper roared, flinging his glass against the wall. "Fine. If I can't shatter him through fear, I'll crush him through fire." He leaned forward, voice venomous. "Burn everything he owns, his garage, his home. Let him choke on ashes while the world watches." The men exchanged uneasy glances but nodded. Jasper smiled thinly, eyes glittering with madness. "If Samuel Reyes wants war, then war he shall have." Back at the garage, Vivian caught her father's hand as he tightened the last bolt on a car. "Dad," she whispered, fear in her voice. "Promise me something." "What is it?" he asked. "No matter what Jasper does next, no matter how dark it gets, promise me we won't let him change who we are. He wants to drag us into his shadows. Don't let him." Samuel pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I promise," he said. "We'll fight him. But we'll fight him as ourselves." And though his voice was steady, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that the next battle would test that promise like never before. The night was quiet, too quiet. Samuel and Vivian had just locked the garage and were walking back home when Helen's phone buzzed. She frowned, reading the message. "It's from one of my old contacts," she muttered. "He says something's moving tonight, something big." Before Samuel could respond, a roar split the silence. Flames erupted into the sky, orange and violent from the direction of the garage. Vivian screamed, "The garage!" They sprinted back, their lungs burning with smoke before they even reached it. The old building that had carried decades of their family's sweat, grease, and laughter was engulfed. Tires popped like gunshots, windows shattered, and black smoke clawed at the night. "No!" Samuel fell to his knees, the fire reflected in his eyes. His life's work gone in minutes. Vivian grabbed his shoulders, coughing. "Dad, we have to get back! It's too dangerous!" He resisted, trying to rush forward, but Helen and Vivian pulled him back. Sirens wailed in the distance as fire engines raced closer. Samuel roared into the smoke, his voice breaking. "Damn you, Jasper! Damn you to hell!" By morning, the fire was out, but so was the garage. Nothing remained but a skeleton of twisted steel and ash. Samuel stood among the ruins, his hands blackened with soot, his heart heavier than it had ever been. Neighbors came to watch, some whispering, others shaking their heads. A few offered words of sympathy, but Samuel barely heard them. "This was all I had left," he muttered hoarsely. "First my name, now my work. He's stripping me piece by piece." Vivian touched his arm, her voice soft but firm. "Not all you had left. You still have me." Samuel turned to her, tears cutting tracks through his soot-streaked face. "And because of me, you were nearly taken last night. Now this. Vivian, I don't know how much more I can protect you from him." She held his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You don't have to protect me from him. You just have to stand with me against him. We fight together." That evening, Helen laid out the truth as they sat in the remains of Samuel's kitchen. "Jasper's crossed the line," she said grimly. "He isn't just attacking your reputation anymore. He's trying to erase you body, work, legacy. That fire wasn't a warning. It was war." Samuel leaned forward, exhausted but burning with anger. "How do you fight a man with endless money, endless men?" Helen smirked, her eyes glinting. "You don't fight him with what he has. You fight him with what he doesn't. Conscience, truth, and a community that's starting to see him for what he really is." Vivian straightened, her resolve hardening. "Then let's show them everything. Every dirty deal, every silenced victim, every family he's destroyed. If he wants to burn us down, we'll drown him in truth." Meanwhile, Jasper sat in his penthouse sipping whiskey as he admired the newspaper headline. "Local garage, destroyed in overnight fire, Reyes family silent." He chuckled. "Silent. Just as I planned. Soon, Samuel will be nothing but a husk of a man, and Vivian will have no choice but to beg for mercy." But Ruth stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You're blind, Jasper. You think you've won because you took his garage? You only gave him a story the town will never forget. Do you know what people love more than power? A man who rises from ashes." Jasper's smile vanished. "Are you siding with him now?" "I'm siding with reality," Ruth said coldly. "You're not winning. You're flailing. And the harder you strike, the more sympathy you give him." Jasper's jaw clenched, his glass shattering in his hand. Blood dripped down his palm, but he didn't flinch. "Then I'll finish him in a way no one can forgive. One move, one strike, and he'll never rise again." Ruth's eyes darkened. Be careful, Jasper, because men who walk too close to fire often burn themselves. That night, Samuel sat outside the ruins of the garage, staring into the charred remains. Vivian brought him a blanket, draping it over his shoulders. Do you remember, she said softly, when I was little and I brought you that broken radio? You told me we could fix anything, no matter how ruined it looked. You sat with me for hours until we got it working. Samuel's lips trembled. Yes, you were so proud, holding that crackling little box like it was treasure. Vivian smiled faintly through tears. Then fix this with me, Dad. Not the garage us. Our lives. We're not ruins. Not yet. But if we give up now, Jasper wins. Samuel closed his eyes, her words piercing deeper than any fire. Slowly, he nodded. You're right. We fight. Together. Vivian squeezed his hand, determination blazing in her eyes. Then let's prepare for the final strike. And in the silence that followed, both father and daughter knew the endgame was coming. The town hall was overflowing. Word had spread quickly. A public forum was being held to address growing concerns about Jasper Hale's business practices, political donations, and whispered quietly among the crowd his connection to the fire that had destroyed Samuel's garage. Samuel stood just outside the entrance, Vivian and Helen beside him. His hands trembled, but not with fear, with resolve. Vivian touched his arm. Dad, are you ready? Samuel's voice was rough but steady. I was born ready. I just forgot for a while. They walked inside. Cameras flashed. Local reporters had gathered, sensing a story too big to miss. At the center of it all sat Jasper, immaculate in a dark suit, his smirk sharp as ever. Ruth sat beside him, her expression unreadable. Mr. Reyes, Jasper drawled loudly as Samuel entered, making sure the microphones caught his voice. Come to watch your reputation crumble further? Or perhaps to beg for forgiveness? The audience stirred, waiting. Samuel stepped forward, the weight of every humiliation pressing on his shoulders. The chair pulled from under him, the whispers of betrayal, the fire that erased his work. But instead of breaking, his voice rang clear. No, Samuel said, locking eyes with him. I came to make sure everyone finally sees you for who you really are. A hush fell over the room. Helen rose, carrying a folder. She laid it on the table before the moderator. These are records. Contracts signed by Jasper Hale's companies. Proof of backroom deals, fraudulent accounts, and payments to silence families he's ruined, including witnesses to the fire. Gasps filled the room. Cameras zoomed in as the moderator flipped through the evidence. Jasper's smirk faltered, but only for a heartbeat. He leaned back, scoffing. Forged documents, lies from a bitter old man and his washed-up allies. Before Samuel could respond, Vivian stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. I was there when you set out to destroy us, Jasper. You didn't just attack my father's name, you tried to erase his life. But you made one mistake you thought fear would silence us. It didn't. It gave us strength. The crowd erupted in murmurs of agreement. Jasper stood abruptly, his mask slipping. His voice rose, sharp with rage. Do you people think you know who I am? I own this city. Every deal, every contract, every brick that stands upright, it exists because of me. And men like Reyes? They're ants. Ants to be crushed when they dare crawl too high. His words echoed in the hall, but instead of applause, silence followed. Disgust hung in the air. Ruth finally stood. For the first time, her voice cut clean through Jasper's 2020. No, Jasper, you don't own this city. You leech from it. You don't build, you burn. And tonight, you've burned yourself. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing as Jasper's furious face filled every lens. Samuel, standing tall, delivered the final blow. You once told me I was nothing but grease under your fingernails. But grease keeps the world turning. And men like you? You're the dirt we wash off. The moderator raised a hand. Mr. Hale, in light of this evidence and your own admission tonight, this matter will be turned over to law enforcement for full investigation. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some clapped Samuel on the back, others shouted his name. For the first time in months, Samuel didn't feel like a ghost. He felt alive. Jasper, red-faced, tried to push through the crowd, but police officers stepped forward, blocking his path. The mighty had fallen. Outside, under the fading glow of streetlights, Samuel and Vivian embraced. You did it, Dad, she whispered. No, Samuel said, pulling back to look at her. We did it. You gave me the courage to stand. Without you, I would have drowned in shame. You saved me, Vivian. Helen smirked, lighting a cigarette. And don't forget me. I like some credit. They laughed, a sound that felt strange after so much sorrow, but healing. Vivian squeezed Samuel's hand. So what now? Samuel looked out toward the horizon, where the ruins of the garage still smoldered faintly. Now we rebuild, not just the garage, us, our lives, brick by brick. And this time, no one takes it away. Vivian smiled, tears in her eyes. Then let's start today. And as father and daughter walked side by side into the dawn, the fire that once consumed their lives now fueled a new beginning. Epilogue. Weeks later, a modest sign was raised above a rebuilt storefront. Reyes and Daughter Auto Works built on ashes, running on love. Inside, Samuel worked with grease-stained hands while Vivian balanced invoices at the counter. Customers filled the garage, not just for repairs, but to be part of a story that had inspired the whole town. As Samuel tightened a bolt, he paused, smiling faintly. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest was gone, and those scars remained in the ruins of memory. In the cracks of his heart, they were no longer marks of defeat, they were proof of survival. Because family, he finally understood, wasn't just blood. It was loyalty. It was love. And love, even burned, always rose again.